Hello, Malik.
Hi.
Malik Isai is on the Open That Door podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you for having me. My second podcast.
Very cool. Well, hopefully, many more to come. So it looks like you're sitting in the bookstore where we shot our Shine the Stoker short film in 2022, in like we're in like Red Hook or something, Brooklyn.
No, we were in Cobble Hill.
Mm,
Yeah. This is my living room.
I love it. I love it. A lover of books.
That's right. I love reading.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um, well, I want to talk about everything, but let me kind of let the viewers and listeners know who you are. Malik Isayi is a filmmaker, a writer, a producer, and also like a man of all trades. When you do short films, sometimes you do it all: videographer, cinematographer, sound, lighting, producing, location scouting.
Yeah.
And then you have this great capacity to let your actors, you write a script, but you're very generous in allowing for improv and kind of letting things happen in the moment.
Yeah. Filmmaking is a collaborative effort. Um, and acting is an art form and you have to allow actors to practice their art, you
Yeah,
know? So,
I love that. I think that's a unique, I wouldn't say every filmmaker comes in with that same collaborative nature, or it varies in scope. Sometimes I think there's a story they want to tell and the actors are of service to that story and that narrative,
right, right.
you know.
Hmm.
So Malik, we just some background. We met. A lot of my long friends are from. Well, we met in Seattle,
Yes.
um, and it. And I was in your. I think I was in your first full length film. Was it
It was the second, but I consider it my first. Yeah.
okay? Your second
Yeah, we met
project.
in college. We met in college, yeah. In like what, 99?
It was yeah,
I think it
sometime
was 90.
in the late '90s.
Yeah.
And what brought you to Seattle at that time?
I was in the military. And I transitioned out of the military in Seattle and I just stayed and
I
I
see.
enrolled in college.
Okay.
And
I didn't realize
yeah,
what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Navy and
Okay.
I was stationed in Guam, overseas, which is this tiny island the United States colonized after World War II. They took it from Spain. Yeah.
Okay. And
Hmm.
was it a 4-year stint in the
No, I
Navy?
stayed in the military for 2.5 years. I got out early because at that time Bill Clinton was cutting down on the military, and he was offering people to get out, like 6 months early. So I got out 6 months early,
Okay.
which was great because the military was just a stepping stone for me. It was a way of paying for college.
Hmm. Oh, interesting. I love that. I don't know if I'm sure you told me that at some point, but I don't remember you being in the military. Thank you for your service. And I think it's great that you used that as a stepping stone. What was your so before Seattle? You're from the South, right?
From Baton Rouge, Louisiana, originally. Yeah.
Louisiana. Okay. And
Mhm.
born and raised there until you went into the military?
Until 17. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I was in Seattle for like 16 years, like almost basically I
Yeah.
was an adult. I became an adult in Seattle.
Like
Um,
almost the entire length of your childhood spent in
yeah,
Louisiana.
from 19 to 36, I was in Seattle. Kind of my formative adult years
Hmm.
in Seattle. Yeah. I
And
consider Seattle home still.
okay. I
Hmm.
think a lot of the artists that I met in Seattle feel the same. You know, they go back home and or go back to Seattle. It's like I'm home. I'm home. Such a
Yeah.
beautiful little corner of the world there. It's just stunning. I was just there last spring, this spring. And
Hmm.
again, it's just sort of when you live there, you stop seeing the beauty as acutely as when you return. Oh my goodness, it's
Yeah,
pretty.
yeah.
So that Seattle and Louisiana could not have been more different, I imagine, for you in many, many ways.
Oh, they're extremely different. I mean, Louisiana is a Confederate state, and so there's a lot of legacy of the
Mhm.
Confederacy in the South. Everywhere you go, you have reminders of the Confederacy, and it's a strange parallel universe where the Confederacy won the war because you have all this the schools, you have a lot of schools and streets and monuments, um, you know, and to a certain extent, a lot of like the policies are driven by these Confederacy, like the Confederate states,
Mhm.
um, and so it's like you know in Seattle, like I'm just gonna say it, like racism just moves differently there. It's
Mhm.
not as out in the open
Mhm.
as it is in the South, and so there is a lot more. It's not as oppressive, like it's not in your face, and it gives you an opportunity to breathe,
Yeah.
and you're not always like trying to protect yourself psychically.
Wow.
And so I felt like I was able to grow in Seattle a lot as an adult because I wasn't always trying to protect my mental health.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. That's profound. And so to when you were in the military, what was that kind of a bridge? I mean, I imagine, you're in this little you're on a ship or in a bubble with, recruits from everywhere. Um, what was that like? Was that your first exposure to people outside of Louisiana?
That was most people in the military's experience to having interracial friendships, right? Like it's very intimate. You're sharing, showering, bunking with people from all over the country who've never really had any experiences with other cultures.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who are enrolled into the military are typically we're from the same class, which is lower class. Rich people don't join the military. Um, and so when you're from a certain class, you have certain things in common, of course, which is class.
Hmm.
But a lot of times what separates the same class is race, right? So
Hmm.
there's that dividing line. But in the military, some of that gets erased. And because of such intimacy, like
Hmm.
you're just in close quarters with each other. So a lot
Yeah.
of these things get broken down.
Yeah.
And you start to see other people's humanity.
Uh,
Yeah. So yeah, like the military was a bridge. It was the first
yeah.
time that I'd had interracial friendships with folks of the opposite race. Um, and so yeah, I was able to humanize
Hmm.
and also be humanized as well.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Ah, I think that is so at the core right now of our challenges in this world. I mean, there's so much at the core, but it's that lack of seeing the humanity in the other and knowing at the end of the day, we all bleed, eat, sleep, snore, love our children, want to feel safe, want prosperity, want to have self expression. It's humanity. We're under, I think, a guise or a narrative right now that there is other than us. It's not right now. That narrative is long running, but I just think that that's beautiful to be able to, like you say, when you bunk and shower and eat, and you're in a bubble basically with people that are different than what you've been exposed to. You start seeing that humanity.
Right.
And so in Seattle, and Seattle's very a lot of artists that are there. Expression is kind of welcomed, I think. So did you know, when you landed in Seattle and decided to stay and you knew you were doing the military for college, did you know what you were going to college for?
Yes. So in 1992, my
Uh-huh.
mom was killed.
In 1890, I'm so sorry,
1992.
1992, your
Yeah,
mom
that'll
was
make me a
killed.
vampire.
That's why well, I want to just acknowledge when you said, I thought you said 1892, so I chuckled, and then you said something that was not funny at all. So, um,
Yeah. So so
yes.
yeah, so in 92, my mom was killed by the police.
Hmm.
And I was going through this um grieving process. And I had met this social worker who helped me process my grief around the loss. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so um at first I knew I was going to college. So it was a matter of like I was thinking journalism or filmmaking. Um but when this happened, my grief was so deep and so like disruptive in my life that, you know, I just, I was angry, I was upset. Um and my brother and sister didn't really have a place to live. So, and I was thinking about like bringing them over to Seattle to raise them. And so, and this social worker really helped me process my grief in a way that was really healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like I give myself credit too, because I was ready to receive
Mm-hmm.
the kind of help that was on offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so he taught me how to express myself, my feelings,
Yeah.
uh, more specifically. And so I was like, yeah, I want to do this for someone as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, I decided to, rather than going into filmmaking, just do social work.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I told myself at the time, it's like I don't have to go to school to be an artist. I can just practice
Yeah.
and do it, you know. And so yeah, I went to. By the time I was, and I'm, you have a couple years to make up what you want to do. So it was kind of solidified when it was time to declare my major,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um,
which was social work, if that
y-
wasn't clear.
it is clear, yes. And so you recall how beautiful to that man, that human, stepped into your world right at the right time to process something that could be debilitating. I mean, the to try to process something of that magnitude, your mother being killed, and not just killed, but killed by police who are supposed to be there in service, peace officers is there what they're called. Um,
Mhm.
and so, what tools did this social worker give you to process your emotions? Do you remember kind of the process?
Well, there was this one incident where we were riding around, um, and it's strange how I met him because I was dating his daughter, yeah.
Okay.
And he just kind of like stepped in and became that father figure.
Mm,
We were riding around and in a car. He was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and he said something that really made me angry, and I completely shut down.
ah,
Which is something I got from my mother, right? Because a lot how we behave in the world. Like our parents are the blueprint for how we kind of move in the world. They kind of set the stage,
yeah,
and if you disrupt that narrative or that blueprint, it's gonna become yours. So
yeah.
one of the things that I learned was just like to shut down
Mm,
and give people the silent treatment. Um, and I was giving him the silent treatment, and he pulled over the car, and he just looked at me. He was just like, it really hurts me when you shut down like this. And I was 19 at the time. And growing up in the South, it's kind of like there's this whole thing about respecting your elders. So he was an elder, and I
mm-hmm,
respected him. And so rather than saying anything, I just kind of just shut down. I wouldn't say anything. And it's like it's okay to be angry with me. It's okay to tell me what you need to tell me. But when you shut down like this, it's really hurtful.
mm.
And I knew that because that's what my mom did to us when she was pissed off. Um, and so I just went off on him. He gave me
Oh.
that permission to go off. And he didn't say anything. He just absorbed it and like he just appreciated it and he started the car up and took back off. And I remembered how that changed the way I thought about things,
Mm,
like anger,
mhm,
um, how it's important to, again, I have to give myself also some credit from being like, I think I had the disposition of wanting to learn, wanting to grow. I've always had that position,
mhm,
disposition. Um, and so I leaned into it. I leaned into learning more about how I weaponize my emotions
mm,
to cope with what was going on with me. And I think that was really important for me to understand, like emotions.
mhm,
And because they play a huge part in our lives. And for a lot of us, we don't really understand. We're just kind of reactionary. Um,
mhm.
and so I wanted to know more about a part that part of myself.
Yeah. Was that the first moment when you really like allowed yourself to unleash at somebody else?
In a way that was like, because he framed it in a way that I thought about it and then I
Mhm.
went off, right? So
Yeah.
as I was going off, I didn't notice at the time, but I was parallel processing what that felt like in his reaction because it was his reaction that gave me permission
Yeah.
and and like you can come back from these things when it's done
Mhm.
right. Arguing the right way, arguing in a way that another person can also hear you, right?
Mhm.
He made me feel heard.
Mhm.
And that's the parallel processing, right? So as I was going off, I was like, he's actually listening,
Mm.
right? And it ultimately disarmed me,
Mm.
right? Because he
Yeah.
wasn't coming back with fire, he was just absorbing it. And that disarmed me. And
That's beautiful.
it was like a controlled burn, if you will.
Yeah, I love it.
You know,
I love that he framed it that you know, it hurt him that you were, like you said, weaponizing your emotion by withholding your feelings, which is a learned behavior.
mhm.
But would you have been safe as a younger person to react, or were you in an environment where that would have been safe or received the way this gentleman received your anger?
Yeah, I can I can say I grew up in a safe environment, though, you know, my mom was open. She's
Mm,
also a single mother who had a lot of stressors in her life with 3 kids.
yeah.
Um, so I would say that it was, my environment was safe in terms of being able to express myself, but I wasn't able to express myself in a way that was healthy because I also grew up in an environment. Well, we've all in this. I'm sorry, I have like something in my throat. I'm gonna mute while I cough. So we grew up in this environment um, that's centered around. Um, I'm trying to find a word that escapes me, and I talk about it all the time. Um, I hate when this happens when I lose my language.
Oh, it happens to, I know, I think when you're a mother and you give birth, your half of your brain cells just go through the birth canal into your child. So, it's okay. And we'll,
Okay, so what do you call the society that's run by men? Patriarchy.
patriarchal.
So,
Yeah.
so growing up under a patriarchy, there's certain ways of being that we kind of glom onto as children, right?
Yeah.
At a certain age, we're not supposed to cry. There's a certain way in which we're supposed to express intimacy,
Hmm.
not only with boys and men, but also girls and women. Yeah. And
Yeah.
with girls and women, it's like domination. Um,
Mhm.
and with boys, it's kind of like um, you're not supposed to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
Um, when I say vulnerable, I mean like crying,
Right.
unless you win a basketball game. I mean, that's one of the like extremes versions of it. Like, men are you have permission to cry if you
Mm.
accomplish something, right?
Because that's like
Um,
the pinnacle of strength is that
exactly.
victory, and then it's okay to be
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah. So in the framework of like the patriarchy, you don't feel safe. Um, in the mid 80s, during the crack cocaine epidemic, the rise of uh, gangster rap, um, there's certain things that kind of moderate your ability to express yourself
Mm-hmm.
in a vulnerable way.
Mm-hmm.
So kids, typically boys who are sensitive to expressing themselves, you just kind of like keep it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't learn how to express these things uh, amongst your friends.
Yeah.
So I think in the household, I was of course safe, but in the neighborhood, I had to find that balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm just imagining. So do you know your dad? Your birth dad, or did you have a stepdad?
I met him twice.
Twice.
I met him twice in my life. Yeah.
Okay.
He was not involved at all. The first time I met my father, I was 7 years old and I was walking to the corner store. Um, my mom had described him to me because he had this birthmark on his cheek, right? It was like this circle, like this dark circle, patch of hair on it. And as I was walking to the store, this gentleman approached me and was like, "Do you know who I am?" So I'm looking at his face and there's this patch. I'm like, "My dad?" He was like,
Mm,
"Yeah, that's right, that's right." And he gave me $5. He's like, "Go buy yourself something."
wow.
Um, and then I met him 3 times. The second time, I was 10. I remember this because it was like around 82. And he came by my mom's house to pick me up because it was my birthday. He wanted to buy me something for my birthday. Now, 3 years had went by the first time I met him. He just,
Yeah.
and so he took me to Kmart and took me to the toy aisle and said, "Buy anything you like." And so I um Return of the Jedi was out at the time, so I remember buying like a TIE fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And he took me to his apartment where his girlfriend was waiting. And so I went to the kitchen because that was the only place with a table. And I started like constructing this toy. And he went into the bedroom to have sex with his girlfriend. And that's where he stayed for the
Oh my
rest
God.
of the afternoon. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so when he came out, he was just like, "You ready?"
Oh my
And
God.
he brought me home. Um, and the third time and the final time, I hung out with my father. It was his birthday. He picked me up. I was 16 years old.
Oh.
And he took me to his mother was having a birthday party for him. And as he was driving, he was just like, "So what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be?" I said, "I'm going to college and I want to be a journalist." He was like, "Oh, okay, that's good. That's good." And so we made it to his house, his mom's house. And they were in the backyard celebrating. And I hung out in the front yard and I sat on like the back of this car, the hood of his car. I just sat there the whole entire time. I didn't interact with anyone because I didn't really know anyone.
Yeah.
And I was 16. So of course I was this kid like, fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just sat there the whole time. And afterwards, he brought me home. And at the age of 17, I enrolled into the military. Um, and in the summer of, no, actually, it was like September 20, no, not 20. What the hell am I talking about? 1991.
Hmm.
Um, and while I was in boot camp, I got woken up in the middle of the night, and it was my mother who called and told me that my dad had passed away.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
wow.
So I was never able to actually um, build a relationship. So,
Yeah.
uh, and it was one of those relationships that really kind of defined how I interacted in my romantic relationships. And
Yeah.
I didn't really discover that until I was in my mid 30s. It's like, oh yeah, this is really about my father. So I had been dating my father all this time. And when I figured that out, I started, like, um, that's why I was mentioned earlier about the blueprint, right? Like,
Yeah.
our parents are the ones who teach us about love, even if they're not in the picture. They're the
Yeah.
blueprint for how we see it and how we experience it. And so when I figured that out, my relationships became healthier,
Uh,
right? I stopped dating my father. I stopped dating women who were abandoned, who were not interested in a deeper connection.
yeah.
Right? That's what I was doing.
Fascinating. I love that you have such, well, I know you as somebody with just a tremendously big heart, compassionate, intelligent, creative, and just an amazing human being. And I love that just this insight that I don't think a lot of men or women take the time to really do that kind of parallel processing and see what am I responsible for here? My life has these results. It's so easy to just kind of blame, blame, blame. We all do it, but to then be that
Mhm.
introspective to say, wait a second, I'm creating this on some level subconsciously. I'm living out the blueprint that I overlaid on top of myself by watching and learning as a kid, which we all do. That's how we learn.
Exactly.
Um, and that's really what I started this podcast for and stepped into this coaching new thought leadership realm is that like the ability to cut the cord to the blueprint that we adopted that is not ours. Do you
Yeah.
think when you started to see that, do you feel like we have a blueprint beneath the layers of misinformation that we learn, or do we create our own blueprint once we're kind of free from, you know, the limiting world that we were brought up in and took as the way, this is how life is, when we start to kind of free ourselves from that, are we kind of inventing our blueprint, or do you think that it's there already?
Well, I think we, these things are passed down,
Yeah.
right, from generation to generation,
Yeah.
and intergenerational transmission, right? Um, and our parents learn from their parents learn from their parents. Um, and once we start to understand that, oh, this is not my narrative, this is a narrative that's been passed down to me, and we start to like kind of rewrite those things.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's like being in recovery.
Mm,
Like it's a constant like vigilance that you have to have,
mm.
because we always want to go back to our default, our equilibrium, right?
Yeah.
And it's that thing that's why change is so difficult,
Hmm.
because we're constantly trying to get back to our equilibrium, even if it's not healthy. And it's because it's what we know, and it's comfort,
Yeah.
even if it's toxic, even if it's not good for us and we know it, but it's comfortable and it's predictable. And
Yeah.
so one of the most difficult things about like changing up that blueprint and creating your own narrative is that um, you have to um, be vigilant, because you're going to constantly, you got to, because you have to recreate that baseline.
Yeah.
And if you're not working on that part, change isn't going to happen. Change isn't going to be effective. Um, and so I think of it as like just, like because you fall back into some of these habits because it's how you were raised, how to cope with things. And so again, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I can't do it this way. This doesn't work for me. Um, and so I think it's just a constant vigilance
Yeah.
until it becomes a lifestyle. And
Uh,
once it becomes a lifestyle, your baseline has changed. But until then, it's constantly like being vigilant until it becomes easy.
yeah.
Uh,
Does it feel, do you have that ease in your world mostly now where you are this new man, newly, defined by your own choices? And do those feel now like that's your new baseline?
I mean, yeah, I've changed my baseline um, like it's been a long time, 20 years or so,
Yeah.
like of just being vigilant and practicing. But
Mm,
that doesn't mean that I don't make the same mistakes. That's what's so curious about the human mind. It's like you can know something and still um, make a decision that is not great for you out of ego, out of like moment of weakness. Um, you know,
yeah.
so um, yeah, even though I have a new baseline, I still do
Mm-hmm.
something shitty to hurt someone, get jealous.
Yeah.
Those are all the emotions that um well, it doesn't take me down like a spiral,
Right.
but you know because I'm human, I'm still susceptible to being shitty.
Yeah. I absolutely. Um, I find like in my household, my family gets the best and the worst of me. Like
Yeah.
my habit patterns, and I spend a lot of time with my family and at home, but that is, I can see them, just those ruts in my brain are so deep in some of my habit ways, and it's just so easy to fall back into them. But I think it's the awareness, it's knowing you have a choice, even if the ruts are deep, and neuroplasticity, like there's a whole science around how we can actually rivet the mind. And
That's
that
right.
is how
The
new,
neural pathways for sure.
yeah, and new habits are possible. I love how you call it a baseline, because it's kind of where it's your resting point. And if that is, you know, cleaned up, I guess, or started anew from what we, originally started with, it is easier, I think, than moving forward into ways you want to be is easier. But for me, it just feels like a lifelong practice. Um, like you said, that vigilance, uh, and my vigilance used to be, I'm a perfectionist and a people pleaser, and my vigilant. I've always been vigilant, but so much of my life was in service to trying to figure out what's going to happen next before it happens, so that I can be like in control. I
Yeah.
really think it comes down to that, and so letting those patterns sort of un, un loosen their hold on me, so that I can be, like you said, more vigilant about being connected and being present and being authentic, being kind and loving, and creating a security that's there no matter what happens a moment from now.
Mm.
And it's for me, it's not been an easy journey, because my vigilance was very strong in the trying to gain control, a sense of control over a life that felt fairly out of control.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I also grew up in a household with a single mother, and yeah, it's interesting because that's just a paradigm that's, neither of us really know what it was like to. I can see now as a mother with a partner. My daughters have two parents at home, and how that balance. It's, the other parent has an anchor on the other side. It's a more whole picture and experience. Um, but being a single mother it's a real thing, and
Yeah, it's a lot of stress.
yeah. And your mom, I mean, she produced. I'm sure your siblings are, but amazing as well. She produced a really lovely human being in you.
I appreciate it. You
Yeah.
know, there was a white paper about growing up, without resources.
Mhm.
Um, and in this white paper, it's like being poor is like going 24 hours without sleep.
Mhm.
Um, and because it's like it just draws a lot of your brain calories, and you're just so like fixated on what you don't have
Yeah.
and what you
Yes.
need to do, that you can't focus on writing, you can't focus on reading, you can't focus on growing in a way that can move you forward
Mhm.
you know
It's so true. And I think from an advantaged point of view, somebody who doesn't know that constant deficit, that the brain drain that somebody in those circumstances literally has survived through for decades, to just kind of the statement of like, pull up your bootstraps, and you have as much choice as the next person. That may be so, but if a person is in that wheel of just surviving,
hmm
and like you said, doesn't have the resources within them to stop and read and breathe and relax, um, and then doesn't have maybe a social worker or something that lands in their lap to suggest that there might be a different way.
yeah, there
I
was
mean,
this
go
go
ahead.
ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you go.
I have this book on my bookshelf back there somewhere. I can't remember the name, but I know it was some Ivy League professors who did a study on poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And how they recreated this was with a game, Family Feud. And you know the game Family Feud, yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I think this they were from Princeton actually. And they what they did was they went into malls in Jersey and chose people at random. On one side, you have the contestants. You have a certain amount of time to answer the question, right? So, say for instance, you have 6 seconds to answer a question. Well, one team will get 6 seconds, the other team will get 3 seconds.
Okay.
And so the other team was always in a deficit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the team with 6 seconds, if you answer the question within 6 seconds, the seconds that are left over, you can carry over into the next answer, right?
Ah,
And so the team with 3 seconds, if you don't have, if you run out of time to answer the question, you can ask for more time,
okay.
right? And so the team who had less time asked for more time, and they became it. They keep got in this cycle of like this deficit of time,
Yeah.
um, and it's just a beautiful example of like this is because a lot of times we associate poverty and being poor as a choice
Right.
and a moral thing, yeah, and it's just like um it's not a moral thing. It's not a choice. Some people are born into these situations and it's very difficult to get out.
Yeah.
And we have people who get out of them, but they're not the norm.
Right.
Like most people who are poor stay poor no matter how hard they work because you get into this deficit cycle. This is why you have um these paycheck loan things where you like
Yeah.
like you get trapped into these cycles and they're very difficult to get out. And so these guys were able to produce the same results in every mall that they went to. And it was just like, it's a formula,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You have people who don't have the resources they need to make better decisions, one,
Hmm.
and two, they don't have the mental capacity outside of surviving.
Yeah, right.
So they're not going to become the next great thought leaders because their mind is bogged down with surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
it's
their experience of that is very real. You know,
exactly.
you could look from the outside and say, well, just do, make these three choices and you'll be fine. But that if the mind cannot break out of that loop, the mind can't break out of that loop, um, without something that will catch that person. If that, because I think often when we step out of our limiting loops is what I call them, because we all have them, whether we're advantaged or disadvantaged. But I think it's less almost the experience that we have when we kind of disrupt our own limiting cycles. It's more of who I don't know who to be. I don't know how to be now in this new unknown territory. It's almost we don't we don't know certain parts of ourselves if we've been, you know, in these habit loops that feel like we're just surviving, or we're trying to control, or we're trying to avoid a deep insecurity of some kind. Um, so I think sometimes to then stop and then ask ourselves to be secure, or to face a new circumstance or environment that we want to be in, it can be terrifying. It requires a great deal of faith in oneself, trust in oneself, and yet these cycles diminish that, because they completely stop us from listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I just think compassion, having a deeper compassion for this species, is so called for right now, because we can't walk in somebody else's shoes a lot of the time, but we have to
Mhm.
believe that their shoes are still legitimate. They're still really do. I think they're doing their best with the. We are all doing our best with the information we have.
Yeah. And I think, we live in a time where there's a lot of deficit in compassion.
Mm.
And I think it's easy to tell someone, oh, you can do it. You just have to work harder. Oh, you can do it, because I've done it.
Yeah,
Um, and, I think um, it's just, we just don't have enough of compassion in our society,
I
um,
agree.
because it's hard.
Because we might then feel responsible. You know, if I, um, one thing I've, you know, one thing that my heart has told me to do is, if in the moment, I pass an unhoused person or somebody asking for money, and I have the opportunity to stop and give them $1 or to do it, never give up the opportunity to be generous when your heart is telling you to give.
Right. Right.
And yet I passed by a skater or some kind of younger man the other day, and my thought was, I have a $20 bill in my wallet. That's all I have. So, and then I passed him, and that calling was strong in me. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go around the one-way city blocks, and I'm gonna go back, and I'm gonna give him this 20, which is more than I would normally give to somebody. But like, damn it, I am committed to being led by my heart at this point in my life. So I found my way back. It took a couple of minutes, and then he was gone. I was like, but I felt, and this brings me to something I want to talk to you about. I felt, regardless of how it resulted, that I chose my pathway that I'm committed to, felt really good.
Yeah. When you live in New York City, you see a lot of uh, unhoused people,
Hmm.
people in need of mental health services. There's just no escaping it. Like they're on the trains,
Yeah.
and I don't actually carry cash with me. I haven't carried cash with me since I lived in Seattle. Like I
Yeah.
just don't carry cash. I pay everything by my phone or
Yeah.
basically my phone. So I don't ever really carry cash. But one of the things that I do when I see someone on the street and they ask me for something is that I look at them
Yeah.
and I may give them a smile.
Yeah.
I may just give them a look that say, I see you.
Yeah.
I always try to humanize them because there's nothing more dehumanizing than being invisible.
Mm.
Because a lot of people feel pity
Yeah.
for people in those situations or embarrassed and that is dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I always try to do is just look them in the face. If I can offer a smile, I will. Um, that I see you.
Yeah.
I try to humanize every person I come across in that way.
And
Um,
the ripple effect of that, I mean, I think back to your social worker who really helped kind of shape your life as it is today, that gift he gave you. Had he not done that, like seeing somebody who's ignored and walked past all day long to stop and just look at them and say, I see me in you and you see me, because I'm in there. I mean, we can pretend that we're not, but we are. We're in that person without a house, without food.
we are one accident away from
We
being that
are.
person,
We are. And
you
so
know?
to give them that validation is huge, Malik, because it the ripple effect is undeniable. Whatever we do, every action we make, we do has a ripple effect. And so it's like, how do you, I always say, get at the end of your life, when you look back in those last few moments, like, what's going to make you feel proud that I looked strangers in the eye and validated their existence instead of walking past because it made me feel funny. That I drove 6 blocks around the city to go back and have a generous moment with somebody who needed a $20 bill more than I did in that moment.
Right.
Um, and one thing that you've been, I don't want to say boldly, but, in social media, you've definitely had a voice about the war in Gaza. And
Mhm.
what I've seen is just your humanity is so strong in your posts. It's not necessarily the popular view for some, but you're just like, these women, these children are just dying. They're losing their lives. Like, the humanity is so absent right now from so much of our policy in this world. And you're also an artist and a social worker. We haven't even talked about your filmmaking, but do you have you lost like, I know you're not worried about followers, but like, what's the response been when you post these very human videos or moments on social media?
I think I've only had one response. That's
Okay.
been a friend of mine who I actually went to graduate school with in Seattle. And she's a lawyer now in Canada. She just became a Canadian citizen. And she's just like, I appreciate you posting these types of things. And I appreciate your voice because
Mm.
I don't have the courage to do that because I might lose my ability to pay
Yeah.
my mortgage. And
That's
I
nice.
don't expect those things out of the people that I know because I
Mm.
know it's difficult. It's easy for someone to say, you should be saying something regardless of the consequences,
Right.
right? Like that's just not how it works in real life. Ideally, you'd want people to, if they have something to say that's contrary to the popular belief, like say it.
Yeah.
And because every voice, you're just talking about ripple effects. Every voice has a ripple. I'm one ripple
Yeah.
in this pond, right? And for the most part, it's been mostly just, you know, silence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's just, like I don't care either way. Because I
Yeah.
feel like I'm in a position and I feel like it's an artist, not only just a human being, but also as an artist. Artists are responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Our responsibility is to capture the zeitgeist as it is.
Mm.
And I feel like I have to be true and put the mirror up. And, like there was this meme going around that said, and I believe this because I come from a conquered people, that people, um, the oppressed see themselves in Gazans
Mm-hmm.
and the the I can't remember it now, but the people who support this genocide see themselves in the colonizers
Mm.
and the settlers, yeah. And that's just I just find that to be a truism, right?
Mm.
Like I see myself in Gazans. Because if it can happen to them, it can happen to the next group of people. And we're setting up all these precedents, right? Like you can kill 15,000 children. You can, that's now been established that you can do that.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that means that this can happen again somewhere else. This also shows me what my government values.
Mm.
And it's not me.
Mm.
It's not the people who look like me. Um, and so it's just very revealing this time. Like you can't hide. Um, you can't hide who you are because even if you're silent, it shows it says something about who you are. Whether or not you can do anything about it because you're afraid you're going to lose your job or not, it's still a statement of where we are in this time, right?
Yeah.
That we don't live in a democracy because people are afraid of losing their jobs if they stand up for a genocide. That is incredibly crazy to me.
It there's just so much fear in front of all of us. If we,
Yeah.
we're going to get canceled, we're going to lose our job, we're going to be stoned. It's just that it's the primitive fear that comes up in us, which is legitimate fear. At the end of the day, I think that we're just animals who are afraid of being un, out of the pack on our own, to be stoned to death or eaten alive, and that type of deep, deep, deep unconscious fear uh, allows us to do things or agree with things that, if you're having a quiet moment with yourself, and really tap into the horrors of what we kind of go along with to avoid putting ourselves in danger or at risk in some way, can be, it's just something to reckon with. And again, we end our lives with just us at the very at those last moments, and I just it's about just, did I live true to myself? Was I true to myself, or did I compromise myself in ways that I'm not happy with? I want to go back. I want another day. I want to tell that
Right.
person I love them. I want to apologize. I want to say, like, this isn't okay. This is
Yeah.
our one life, and we get to spend it, um, with as much choice as we believe we have, or truly have. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was a friend of mine, um, because you keep going back to this theme of like the last moments and you're
yeah,
reflecting life. Um, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine. We hadn't spoken in a couple of years, and it was her birthday, and she just turned 51. And and we're like, we're just seeing each other age, just like, seeing you because we're the same age.
yeah.
Like, I remember you with the rosy cheeks and
Chubby, rosy cheeks. Yeah,
in college. Yeah, you like this young, vibrant woman. I'm not saying you're not vibrant now,
yeah,
right? But we are all like, it's so interesting just coming up and, seeing your peers age with you. And we have to stay in touch because time is going by so
Mm,
quickly, and making an effort to talk and connect
yeah.
with each other more, uh, because it's going by really quickly. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I want to be proud of if I'm so lucky to have a moment to reflect on my life,
Yeah.
um, are the relationships that I watered,
Oh,
you know?
a
So I
thousand.
think that's the most, I want that to be the most valuable thing, because that's what you're going to remember. You're not going to remember how much money you made,
No.
that you won capitalism. No one is going to their grave like, yes, I won capitalism.
Yeah.
They're
That's how they.
reflecting on what's been lost, what
Well said.
opportunities were lost, what relationships got away. Those are the things that ultimately, genetically encoded in us, those are the things that really matter. Are
Mm.
those people that we have relationships with?
Yeah. Otherwise, we're just in a bubble, in a, you know, living this imaginary life in our head. It's true. Life happens in relationship with somebody else.
Mhm.
Anything, any opportunity, any impact we have exists through and with other people and connections. And for listeners, and um, that if there's anything, gift yourself with when you feel the urge to say hi or to call or to send a note to somebody, just do it. Send a text. It takes 3 seconds. It takes 30 seconds. Call somebody. It's true. Water those relationships.
Yeah, exactly. It's
That's how you
important.
end up with this a glorious garden at the end of your life.
Exactly. And those are the things that also like give back, right?
Yeah. Because we remind people that they matter.
Yeah. I'm also happy to have you back in my life. One of the things that I remember, I am really proud of you, um, and your hero's journey,
Mm,
finding your way back to your art. And I know that you took some time off because you raised family, you lived your life,
yeah.
and and I started to see on Facebook that you were acting again.
Yeah.
And I reached out and I was just like, it's really nice to see you do this again.
Well,
And um, so yeah, I'm really proud of you for finding your voice artistically
mm,
again, doing it again, and not giving up because you're now a middle-aged woman.
yeah.
And um, you know, so yeah, I just wanted to say that.
That means a lot to me, Malik. Thank you. It
Mhm.
really does. I feel seen and heard, and you're right. I feel like in a way I'm just starting. Like this. I love that, the hero's journey, and I am on a hero's journey. I will acknowledge that because I've had to overcome a lot of not necessarily external challenges, but internal worthiness, and really feeling like I have a place at the table. That's been a lifelong journey for me, and I know I'm not alone. I know there are people who look advantaged but don't feel it, or people who are disadvantaged but find a way forward, um, or people who are advantaged and dedicate their lives to sharing their literal and figurative wealth with as many people as possible, to open doors for others. I think that, to me, that's a life worth lived, well lived.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you know the business, the film business is, and I think any art where people are trying to make, it's the business of exclusion. So it's kind of built in to make you feel really bad about yourself.
Yeah.
If you
Oh
haven't
yeah.
made it at a certain age, if you don't look a certain way, if you are a certain age, and still pursuing it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, well. such and such made it at 23 and blah blah blah, and you're 52 now and you're still doing it, and
Right.
like, so there are all of these things, that all these challenges that we kind of internalize and blame ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
creates a situation where you don't feel good about yourself because you're constantly outwardly like judging yourself. You compare yourself to others in your peer group.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah, and I mean, I've sort of shifted over to this podcast and writing and speaking and, using my own words at this point rather than really acting using somebody else's. Um, but let's briefly talk about so you've been a filmmaker conjointly with being a social worker and changing undoubtedly the pathway for numerous children. Thank you for that, for doing that. That that is heartwarming to me, and I can't imagine how many lives you've helped shape and shift and given new ways of thinking to these children that maybe they didn't, originally come with. Um, but simultaneously, you've made films for 30 years, more or less, 3 decades, and so you made a film called Ota. Am I pronouncing it
Ute.
right? Ote.
Ute.
Ute. OTE.
Yeah.
And right now it's
With the
playing.
over the O.
What's that?
With the two dots, the
Yeah,
umlaut over the O.
the
Ute.
umlaut. Um, and it's released in many places in Europe right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's streaming in Europe on sooner.de.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's been in some big festivals. It's kind of got some footing.
Yeah, yeah. Surprisingly, it's the little art film that could,
Yeah.
hold on, there's an alarm going off. I'm sure you can hear it. Let me go silence it real quick, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so it's one of the film kind of took off. And so the film is about African American woman who solo backpacks across Turkey to meet up with a friend in Armenia. And along the way, you know, she discovers, um, herself through some of the locals, and just connects with a lot of the people she comes across.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to send you a link actually because I don't think you've seen it.
I have not.
Yeah.
Is it a film that people in the States will be able to see at some point?
I'm not sure if we'll get distribution
Okay.
here in the States. Quite frankly, I'm ready to move on because it's just, um, when you're with a film this long, it gets really tiring, and
Sure.
you're just ready to move on to the next. Um, and it's unfortunate because I don't have a team that I can hand it off to. It's like, hey, you guys go handle it. I
Yeah.
do have a team overseas that they're doing all that stuff. But as an artist, I can't also like bog myself down like for months and months trying to get a film distribution. So I think at some point what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it up on Vimeo,
Okay.
um, um, where people can see it there. Yeah.
And can you charge a small fee?
Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
like um I forget what they call it, OTT something.
Okay.
Uh so it's like you know, you could charge what you want, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so Vimeo have a thing where you can set up your own shop
I love it.
for your, for your film.
Yeah. You're a beautiful filmmaker, and I do want to see Ute.
Okay. Yeah,
Ute.
yeah.
So please send me the link.
I will
Um,
see.
and you have a website, malik.nye.
See.
NYC. That's it, Malik.nyc.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And a couple, I think a couple of my films can just be seen there as well.
Okay, I
But no,
recommend people check out Malik. Beautiful storyteller. Your narratives are, it's not, they don't follow the traditional act one, act two, act three. Um, they're more open ended and more of a journey. And they just, I think they explore that human connection, those moments between people, um, which are so, it's beautiful. And you're just such a beautiful visionary of an artist and a filmmaker, and it's been a pleasure to work with you twice now, and to see your trajectory and the commitment you have to yourself and to your gifts, both creatively and also knowing that you have the capacity to make a tremendous difference in people's lives artistically and also at work every day with kids who really need somebody like you in their lives.
I appreciate it. Well, I like again, um I am really proud of you and how you're able to um just change your trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
You willing it into existence.
Yeah.
Uh, and you remember that time? I know it feels like you're wrapping it up, but I want the audience to know, like, New York City,
Yeah.
2.5 million people. And one day I run into you and your family
Yeah.
in a
In the
train.
subway,
Yeah. How ridiculous is that? Like,
right?
what are the odds of that happening?
I mean, 2.5, 1 to 2.5 million, right? It was insane. Yeah, we were just, I don't know if
We
it was
hadn't seen each other in years.
years, nor
Yeah.
had we really talked. I mean, I know we've maintained our friendship, but we weren't like, calling each other yearly, annually. Um, but yeah, to just be walking we just got off we were walking to, I think it was Grand Central or something,
There's Grand Central. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
leaving to go to our hotel in the flower district or whatever. And I'm like, is that Malik? Just passing. I know. Amazing. It was fate. Fate.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was just it was so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I hope that we'll be able to collaborate again in the future.
That would be a dream come true. Yeah. And I will continue to watch your work, and I want you to keep making films because your films are beautiful and meaningful and remind us that really it's the relationships at the end of the day that matter and not the drama that goes along with Hollywood narratives and human narratives so often.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Love you, Hollis.
I love you, Malik. We'll talk again soon.
Again soon.
Thank you for being on Open That Door.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.